Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Raven's Readings. I will be reading to you from The Tower Treasure. It's from 1927, the first in a series of Hardy Boys novels written under the pseudonym Franklin W. Dixon. The two teenage boys, Frank and Joe, work together as a detective team, amateurs still, but occasionally assisting their father, Fenton Hardy, a private investigator. This is the last episode. What would you like next? Treasure Island? Maybe another set of Jeeves stories by Wodehouse. I do readings twice a week. If you subscribe to my Substack newsletter, you'll get notified of my updates as soon as they're ready. If you enjoy this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. Last episode, the boys found the correct old tower. They then found the treasure, and they headed back to town. Chapter 23. Adelia Applegate's Compliment. The curtain rolled down on the mystery of the tower treasure that afternoon in the library of the Applegate home. The Hardy boys had gone directly to their father with the story of the recovery of the loot, and Fenton Hardy had lost no time in acquainting Herd Applegate with the facts. Between them, they arranged a little surprise for Chief Collig and Detective Smuff, as well for Henry Robinson. On the invitation of Herd Applegate, the chief brought Mr. Robinson to Tower Mansion to be faced with additional evidence, as Fenton Hardy suavely put it. Chief Collig and Detective Smuff entered the library with their prisoner between them. They had confidently anticipated that Mr. Applegate had discovered some new facts that would further serve to tighten the web about the unfortunate caretaker. When they came into the room, there was nothing at first to eradicate this impression. Herd Applegate and Adelia Applegate sat by the huge library table, and with them were Mr. Hardy and his sons. Chief Collig did not notice at first the gunny sack lying on the table. "Well, Mr. Applegate," said the chief, fanning himself as usual with his hat, "I brought along Mr. Robinson, just as you asked." "Good. As I mentioned to you, there has been some new evidence in this case." "I knew something would turn up," grunted Smuff. "Not that any new evidence is needed, of course," declared the chief. "We got this fellow dead to rights as it is. He ain't got a chance in the world, but still, it's just as good to make a real strong case of it." "I'm afraid you don't understand me," went on Herd Applegate. "This new evidence will clear Mr. Robinson, and when he's cleared, I want him back in my employ again." "Huh?" gasped Chief Collig. "What'd you say?" exclaimed Smuff. "The stolen stuff has been found," said Mr. Applegate. "No." "Here it is," put in Fenton Hardy, getting up and dumping the gunny sack upside down on the table. There was a tinkle and clatter as jewels came rolling out of the table, and then there was a rustle of paper as the packets of bonds follow. "Where was it found?" asked the chief. "This doesn't clear him. He probably hid it someplace." "The stuff was found just where Jack Lee said he hid it, in the old tower." "But the old tower was searched high and low." "There is more than one old tower," went on Mr. Hardy. "Only we didn't happen to think about that at the time. It was found in the old water tower down at the junction where Jack Lee used to work." Chief Collig was speechless with surprise. He gazed at Smuff, whose jaw had dropped in astonishment. "Who found it?" asked Smuff at last. "These two lads," said Mr. Applegate, indicating the Hardy boys. "They found it this morning." "Them kids," scoffed Chief Collig. "I don't believe it." "Well, there's the stuff to prove it," snapped Fenton Hardy. "I've got my jewelry back, thanks to them," declared Adelia Applegate shrilly. "They were smarter than the whole pack of you. If it wasn't for them, the stuff would never have been found. And I was the one who didn't want to let them search the old tower and who spoke crossly to them. Why, they're real detectives, both of them." In all the talk and excitement that followed the clearing up of the tower mystery, the Hardy boys received no compliment that they treasured so much as that remark of Adelia Applegate's. "Well," said Chief Collig, scratching his head, "I'll be bumped." He looked at Smuff. "I'll be bumped too," declared Smuff. "This beats all," said the chief. "It sure does," agreed his faithful satellite. "Oh, shut up," snapped the chief. "Who asked you anything?" "Oh, nobody." "Well, then keep quiet. A fine detective you are. Why didn't you think of that? The old tower. Of course he meant the old water tower. What else could he have meant? But you wouldn't think of it. Oh, no, not in 100 years. You wouldn't think of it. What kind of a detective are you, anyway? Here was a case that was as simple as ABC, and you couldn't think of it. You let yourself be beat by a couple of boys. Smuff looked properly ashamed of himself, although it was plain that he was struggling with the temptation to ask the chief why he had not thought of the water tower, too. But he stifled the impulse, and thereby doubtless saved the chief the trouble of dismissing him for impudence and insubordination. "Yes," said Herd Applegate, "the Hardy boys recovered the treasure, and I think you will admit that Mr. Robinson is cleared. Personally, I am satisfied that he knew nothing whatever of the theft, and I want to apologize to him for any unjust suspicions I may have had. Mr. Robinson, will you let me shake your hand?" Trembling, Henry Robinson stepped forward. His face had been illuminated by a glow of incredulous hope from the moment he learned of the discovery of the loot. "Am I really cleared?" he asked. "I knew things looked bad against me all along. I hardly dared hope." "I guess you'll be let off now, all right," said Chief Colley grudgingly. "There will be formalities, of course," said Fenton Hardy, "but I'm pretty sure the prosecution won't continue. The discovery of this loot proves Red Jackley's story was correct from start to finish." "But how about that $900? demanded Smuff suspiciously. Mr. Robinson straightened up. "I'm sorry," he said, "but even yet I can't explain that. I can in a few days, perhaps, but I promise to keep silent about that money. It's a private matter entirely." "I don't think we need to bother about that," objected Herd Applegate. "I've checked over the treasure, and it's all there. All the bonds and all the jewelry. There's nothing missing. As for the $900, why, that is Mr. Robinson's own affair." Reluctantly, Smuff subsided into silence. "Will you come back into my employ, Mr. Robinson?" said Herd Applegate. "Of course, I feel very keenly because you were justly accused, and I want to make it up to you. If you will consent to come back to Tower Mansion as caretaker again, I will increase your salary, and I'll also insist that you accept back pay for the time you're away." "Oh, why," stammered Mr. Robinson, "this is good of you, Mr. Applegate. Of course I'll come back. I'll be glad to. It'll mean a lot to my wife and daughters, and to Perry. He'll be able to go back to school again." "Good," exclaimed Joe Hardy, impulsively slapping his knee. Then, finding that he had attracted attention to himself, he sank back into his chair, embarrassed. "And as for the Hardy boys," proceeded Herd Applegate, "seeing as they discovered the treasure—" "Real detectives," shrilled Adelia. "Real detectives, both of them. Smart lads." "Yes, they showed some real detective work, and I hope they grow up to follow in their father's footsteps. But as I was saying, they discovered the treasure, and of course they'll get the reward." $1,000, exclaimed Detective Smuff in awe. "Dollars, Mr. Smuff, dollars," corrected Adelia Applegate severely. "No slang, please, not in Tower Mansion." 1,000 Iron Men, declared Smuff unheeding. 1,000 round, fat, juicy smackers for a couple of kids. And a real detective like me— The thought was too much for him. He sank his head in his hands and groaned aloud. Frank and Joe did not dare to look at each other. They were finding it difficult enough to restrain their laughter without that. "Yes, $1,000, went on Herd Applegate. "I'll write the checks now, $500 each." With that, he took out his fountain pen, reached in a drawer of the table for a checkbook, and soon the silence was broken by the scratching of pen on paper. Herd Applegate wrote out 2 checks, each for $500, and these he handed to the boys. Frank and Joe accepted them with thanks, folded them up, and put them in their pockets. "And that, I think," concluded Mr. Applegate, "finishes the mystery of the Tower robbery." "Well, thanks to the Hardy boys," chimed in his sister. "Real detectives, both of them. I must ask them up for supper some night." Chapter 24. The Last of the Tower Case. The discovery of the Tower Mansion treasure was a Bayport sensation for almost a week, and a week is a long time for any sensation to last, even in Bayport. People said that, they knew all along that Mr. Robinson was innocent of the theft, and went as far out of their way to be nice to him as they'd gone out of their way to be unkind to him and ignore him when he was accused of crime. People, too, were loud in their praises of the Hardy boys, and everybody predicted a bright future for them and said they knew all along that the boys were bound to solve the mystery if they kept at it long enough. All of this the boys took with a grain of salt, as the saying is, for they knew that the public is fickle and as quick to condemn failure as it is to praise success. Frank and Joe did not let the adulation turn their heads. When we couldn't find the treasure, everybody said that we were just nuisances, little boys trying to play detective, laughed Frank. Now that we found it, all that is forgotten. The main thing is that we've proved to Dad that we know how to keep our ears and eyes open. And we've got $1,000 between us. A mighty nice start from a bank account. Well, I'll say it is. I wish another mystery would come along. We can't expect to get a reward for every case we work on, and we can't expect to solve them all either, Frank pointed out. We can't expect to get many cases to try our hand at. Well, we're not professionals just yet. No, but we will be someday. This conversation took place as the Hardy boys were on their way up to Tower Mansion about a week later. Adelia Applegate, who had taken a great fancy to the lads, in violent contrast to her dislike of them on the day they'd gone to make a search of the old tower, had invited them up to Tower Mansion for supper. She had also asked them to invite a number of their chums. So Slim Robinson, Chet Morton, Biff Hooper, Jerry Gilroy, Phil Cohen, and Tony Prito had all been invited by the brothers to attend. When the Hardy boys reached the mansion, they found that the others had already arrived. "We're waiting for you," shrilled Miss Applegate, who was decked out in an ancient yellow gown with remarkable trimmings of black and red. "Everybody's hungry." She soon led the way to the dining room, where a long table had been prepared for the boys. They gasped when they saw that array, and Miss Applegate beamed. "I know you don't want an old woman like me watching you while you eat," she cried, so go right ahead and put your elbows on the table if you wish." There was a scramble for places, and as a servant came in with the soup, Frank Hardy sprang to his feet. "3 cheers for Miss Applegate." They were given with vociferous enthusiasm. Miss Applegate blushed with pleasure, and as she left the room, the Hardy boys and their chums were sitting down to a banquet the like of they had never seen before. For more than half an hour they indulged in roast chicken, crisp and brown, huge helpings of fluffy mashed potatoes, pickles, vegetables and salads, pies and puddings to suit every taste, and when the last boy sank back in his chair with a happy sigh, there was still food to spare. "I never thought I'd see the day when I'd quit eating while there was still some chicken on the table," murmured Chet Morton, "but this is the day." "We have the Hardy boys to thank for this spread," said Jerry. "Let's give them 3 cheers." The boys roared out their hip, hip, hurrah 3 times, while Joe and Frank looked acutely uncomfortable. They looked still more uncomfortable when Slim Robinson got up, pushing back his chair. "I'd like to say something, fellows, if you don't mind." "3 cheers for Slim," yelled someone. So the boys gave Slim 3 cheers, and he gulped and blushed crimson. "Speech, speech," the cry was taken up. "I'm not going to make any speech," he said. "I only want to say something. I'll go ahead. No, I'm not going to hand out any compliments to the Hardy boys." Joe and Frank looked greatly relieved. They had been afraid of being embarrassed by Slim's gratitude. "Everybody knows what they've done, and everybody knows what it means to me and to my family." "Ah, you bet. Sure. But I just wanted to clear up one point on behalf of my father. 3 cheers for Henry Robinson. He's all right." The 3 cheers for Mr. Robinson were perhaps a little weaker than the others, but that was only because some of the boys were beginning to show slight signs of hoarseness by that time. "It's about the $900 that he got just about the time of the robbery," said Slim. "He couldn't explain it at the time, and it looked bad against him." "Oh, it doesn't matter where he got it," shouted Biff Hooper. "I'll bet he got it honestly anyway, and if anyone else says anything different, well, just let him come outside." No one said differently. "Yes, he got it honestly, of course," said Slim. "The money was paid him by a man who owed it to him, but Dad couldn't say anything about it because he promised not to. This man owed 2 other men besides my father. Those debts should have been paid first. He was afraid the others would sue him if they heard he'd already paid Dad, so he made my father promise to say nothing. And when my dad makes a promise, he keeps it. The boys looked at one another. To tell the truth, few of them had thought of the affair of the $900, but now that it was recalled to them, they realized that here was the final angle of the Tower Mansion mystery cleared up at last. They cheered Slim to the echo, they pounded on the table with their knives, and when Herb Applegate came in to see what the racket was about, they gave him 3 cheers and made him sit at the head of the table. And that ended the affair of Tower Mansion, but it did not end the career of the Hardy boys as amateur detectives. They were soon to be called on to help solve another mystery, and the story of their adventures in this case will be told in the next volume in this series, entitled The Hardy Boys, The House on the Cliff. Speech, speech, the boys were shouting to Herb Applegate. The old stamp collector stood up, smiling. It's been a long time since there's been a crowd of boys in the Tower Mansion, he said. I've been in danger of forgetting that I was ever young once myself. So I want you to come back often. I want you to know that Tower Mansion is always open to the Hardy boys and their chums. The Hardy boys looked at one another as the crowd about the table broke into a yell of delight. He's a pretty good old scout after all, isn't he? Said Frank. You bet he is, replied his brother. The end. Well, a happy ending, and looks like there'll be more adventures. This was written a century ago. What did you think about the style? Would you like more of this genre? If you enjoyed this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. Check out my other posts on my Substack at ravensview.substack.com. And remember to share this with your friends. Ta-ta for now.